Newsfirst, face to face.
Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. Tonight we are with Prashan Visser, President of the United Centenary Front. Welcome, Prashan.
Thank you for having me.
Well, 2 years ago the people asked for change, a system change, which obviously meant they want new parties coming in and not the same old faces. So we have Prashan, who is heading one of those new parties. Prashan, tell us about the new United Centenary Front.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity, and really want to appreciate your platforming new parties and new opportunities to come and speak about our role in this democracy. Obviously, the people are asking for a change. They don't believe that the established parties and career politicians have the solutions for our country's groaning problems. And I really believe that if you look at the political structures right now, are we led by the best among us? If you look at Sri Lankans and their capacity, their intelligence, their ability to, solve problems, among us are those in politics the best among us? And the question overwhelmingly is no. So then it's time that we pave the way for capable, competent, clean individuals to actually have a platform to compete. And that's what this is about. We want ordinary citizens who are gifted and competent and honest to stand up and say it's time to serve, and that's the United Centenary Front.
So did you not feel that you could affect these changes while joining one of the established parties?
That would have been the easy option, but unfortunately after many years of watching the system, watching these career politicians and the way they've operated, the way they've almost been interchangeable when it comes to corruption, when it comes to moving from one party to the other, and you look at that and say, why would you go and sacrifice your life into that reality that is not going to bring the outcome that we all dream of? And so we're going to take the hard and narrow road of trying to build from the bottom up, and I believe it's possible, and I believe this is the time when we have to do it.
So it's a different political culture which you're trying to bring in. Mm-hmm. Now, Prashan, in many other countries, especially in Europe, when the people are fed up with the established parties, they go out and they launch many new parties, small parties, large parties, parties based on various themes, women's rights, green parties, and so on and so forth. But in Sri Lanka, we haven't seen a lot of new parties. Why is that?
There's definitely a system that's built to protect the career politician, a system that's built to protect and preserve the established parties that have been around for decades. And for new thought, new ideas, new movements, there is a strong barrier. But despite that, that's not going to destroy our resolve. We have not been just doing this overnight. For the last 5 years, we've been building our capacity. We've created our own political academies. We've been working in all 25 districts. And we're seeing that there's a generation that wants change. And regardless of the amount of barriers that you put in front of us, we're not going to quit and lay down and say what to do. We have to do something. And if not now, when? And if not us, who? And that reality is pushing us forward. And I also believe that if you look at all these established parties, they have been friends, they're working with each other, they've been in each other's governments, they have been apologetic towards each other's failures at times. It's been opportunist politics, one after the other, waiting for the other to fail just to come in. And no one's been elected because they are better or more capable. It's just because people are fed up with the other. That's not a good reason to hand over a country to a government just because you have no other options. I believe Sri Lanka deserves better options. There are better, capable Sri Lankans out there, and we need to break through these barriers, and now is the time.
How easy or difficult is it to launch a new party, to register it, and to get that official recognition, and then to carry that message to the voters throughout the island?
I will even venture out to say it may be one of the most difficult things to do because the system is placed in a way, it's almost, I wouldn't say rigged, but it almost feels like it's rigged. So you have insurmountable odds. And many people have given up. Many people have finally succumbed to saying this is what Sri Lanka is always going to be. Maybe we'll just go lean on the establishment and try and make a difference. But then you see those people just becoming the very thing that they despise. You can't lean on the establishment and hope to change it because they will consume you. So you have to keep fighting. Do you have the stamina, the resolve, the capacity? Because it can be done. It has to be done. And just because there are difficulties even with media, there's difficulties with getting registration, there's difficulty with funding. These shouldn't stop you if you really care about your nation and the future, for your children's future. Because if we allow these career politicians to continue, I can bet you every penny I have, it's going to be more of the same. They're just going to continue. There is no clear vision. There's no clear competence. Where do you want to take us to? Are you able to take us there? They don't have it. So they're just waiting from one election cycle to the other. There's no vision for the nation. And we can't afford to have that kind of leadership anymore. And we have to stand up. And every time I get an opportunity, I ask people saying, it may be you. You have to stand up now and serve. It's a sacrifice. This is not a fun environment to be in. The establishment will pounce you down, try to destroy you. But if you don't stand up now, you will be governed by mediocrity. You will be governed by corruption. And eventually, it'll be too late. And so now is the time.
Now, Prashan, elections are coming. We don't know exactly when, but there are certain constitutional deadlines, of course. But we don't know whether we'll get the presidential or a general election. But most parties are preparing for one or both. Tell us about the preparations in your party.
So even then, if you could see, it should be very clear when an election is going to be held. It shouldn't be hidden to the benefit of the incumbent or the benefit of the establishment, for it's easier for them to organize themselves. But regardless, like I said, our resolve is far stronger than their conniving tricks. We are ready to compete in all 25 districts at the general election. We're hoping to compete at every polling division across this country. And we've been building our capacity, like I said, nearly 5 years now. And our goal is to make sure that citizens who want to serve, who are competent, who are willing to be held accountable, will have a platform to compete. And the beauty is our party is the most diverse party in Sri Lanka. 50% of the ethno-religious majority and 50% of all the other ethnic and religious minorities coming together. We can compete from the northernmost point of this country to the southernmost point of this country, and east to the west, because all religions, all ethnicities were coming together, young and old. 50% of our leadership are women. Not because it's a token, not because it's a quota, because some of our most competent, 50% are women. We have 35% under the age of 35. We've managed to build it. All these excuses, these established politicians are saying, oh, women are not coming forward, young people are not interested. That's all rubbish. We're seeing a total different narrative. And so we're ready and we're looking to compete. And we know it's not going to be easy, but we're going to be competitive. And this is not for a certificate of participation. We are competing to win as many as we can, and we're giving it everything we have.
But out there at the grassroots in all these districts, you're competing with parties that have been established for 40, 50, 60 years. They've got the apparatus, they've got regional officers, they've got people who were born red or blue or yellow or green or whatever. How do you break through all that?
Yeah. We have to break through it, and one thing we're seeing is the Aragale gave us a glimpse of hope. There was an awakening of the democracy or the citizens' desire to be part of active governance and hold the establishment or the politician accountable. And now we need to take a step further from that. And also there was an awakening of an inclusive Sri Lankan identity that, we can't be divided. They divided us, they pit us against each other so that they can continue to rob, they can continue to destroy, they can continue to govern in mediocrity. But that whole idea of we need to come together, we need to be vigilant, we need to be active citizens. And they realized the same blood-tainted hands, the same muddied hands, the same hands that have been in partnership with each other are not going to usher in a new era of prosperity and justice and equality. And so people are realizing we want an alternative. Even we did a national poll in all 25 districts just about a month ago. Over 80% of the population still say we are open to voting completely outside the known parties. They're open to that. So now we're trying to make sure, saying, if you're open to it, now take that step. Give opportunity. Let these career politicians be afraid. Be very afraid. Because if you're corrupt, if you're not transparent, if you are just an opportunist without solutions and just faking it, you need to be afraid. Because there's a new wave coming.
Politics in Sri Lanka is all about horse deals, alliances. We see people jumping from one party to the other, military men joining professionals joining, various things are happening. But in your case, your party's case, are you allowing members of other parties to jump over and sort of cross over and join your party? What's the format here?
So we have some very clear ideals that we are different from other parties. And if anybody wants to join us, they have to fulfill those requirements. Among them, one is you have to publicly declare your assets every year. You have to be held accountable. You cannot have any criminal record or any sort of misgivings when you were in power. At the same time, you need to declare your finances as a campaign when you ran for office. How much money did you spend? Who gave you that money? Whose pocket are you in now because of that? There needs to be some clarity on that. At the same time, you need to have competence. Career politicians, my biggest question is, they haven't won in a certain career. They haven't excelled. They haven't shown that they're the best and brightest. They've just been around, lingered around. And especially in a country that's now finding ourselves bankrupt, politicians have never seen success. And just because they've been around the longest, letting them take over is not going to work. We want to know, what have you excelled in? What sort of problems have you solved? What sort of vision do you have? And so we ask 4 key questions before somebody wants to join us. Number 1, do you have character and integrity? We cannot compromise that. That has been the cancer of our society, this corruption, because people have sold their soul, and we cannot allow that. Number 2, compassion. Do you have empathy? Do you feel for the pain of the people? We're talking of stability. What stability? Half the population is below the poverty line. Malnutrition among children is soaring. People are hurting right now. When we're in the villages, when we're even in the urban areas, the poverty is just crippling. Do you feel the pain and the urgency to respond and the responsibility that you have to serve them? Thirdly, we ask the question, are you competent? And the competence is not just academic. Professionally, are you able to deliver? But not just deliver, do you have a track record of good judgment? Because most of these politicians have been wrong for many years. Some of these parties 30 years ago thought violence was the way to bring about freedom. Then 15 years ago, they thought Mahinda Rajapaksa was the way to bring change. And now they're saying, well, their judgment. And finally, is the clarity of vision. Where are you taking us? Do you know your ideology? Do you know how you're going to accomplish it? Do you know where we're heading? If you don't have those things, then I don't think it's a wise decision to consider joining us.
But Prashan, various political parties have from time to time paid lip service to this concept of bringing in professionals. The very idea of the national list, 25 or 29 MPs actually, who are appointed, was so that professionals can be brought in purely through appointments rather than having to go out there and canvass for votes. Then we have various parties which have come out with Viatmaga and various other formats, and hundreds of professionals have joined. But then once the election is over, that all seems to dissipate. They are no longer around, or they are no longer professionals. They turn into politicians. How is your party different in this respect?
That's a great question. And that's when you have the inner circle of politicians, when they realize that their market value has diminished because last election's promises have not been delivered. They have been caught incompetent. Then they try to now rebrand themselves by surrounding the core with what appears to be professionals. And then say, well, these people can do it. They're coming in. We're going to love it. But the truth is the core is just trying to survive. And it's almost like a symbiotic relationship where they're just living off that reputation for their existence. That's what career politicians have done in this country. But if you're creating a brand new entity that is not looking to survive politically, of just trying to play politics, but saying we want to deliver and we want to put the right person for the right job. Any party I could name right now, they're going to pick party seniority for the cabinet position as opposed to competence and the right person for the right job. None of them are going to be comfortable with independent commissions and independent groups, and no one is very clear on a national policy because they just want to do some initiatives now and walk away. But if you start brand new, you can start saying, we need the right person for the right job. We're not doing this because we want a cabinet position. We want to get into this situation to bring the right person. And we're even willing to say closer to the election, here's the cabinet. the best among us in Sri Lanka to lead us with education, to lead us in our foreign policy, and let them lead. Obviously, government will watch over and guide to ensure there's a cohesive policy, but it can be done. But as long as these parties are at the helm, they're going to look at how do we survive this cycle to the next cycle to the next cycle, and it's not about change for the country.
Well, as you said, you do get party seniority in most other parties, which determines who gets what ministry. So you may end up with a minister in a particular industry who knows nothing about that industry. So in your setup, would you be cutting that out? Would it be, for example, the fisheries minister would have some knowledge of fisheries, the agriculture minister would actually know how to plant a plant and not take us down ruinous policy paths and so on?
Absolutely, in no uncertain terms. I can guarantee that's what we're here for, to bring the right people for the right jobs and stop political interference and let them govern to a cohesive national policy. Because the truth is, when you allow incompetent individuals to continue to govern, the final product is always going to be mediocre. And what I've seen is, if you look at the Singaporean cabinet, if you look at countries that have been thriving, they have the best and brightest leading their nation, because this is their nation's future at stake. We can't allow to do this anymore. How many times have we had individuals who should have no business running anything? If they were in a company, you wouldn't even give them the janitorial service because you know they're not reliable. But just because they're seniors in the party, you're going to allow them to run this country? That has to end. I'm not going to throw the dice on my children's future on these parties anymore. I'm done. And I know the challenge is overwhelming, but we're in it, and we're in it to win it, and we're going to give everything we have. And we're not done in one cycle either. We have given the next 25 years of our life. We're going to give it everything we have to bring about transformation in Sri Lanka. And for those who are watching, we want to humbly ask you, it's time to stand up and serve. Don't believe in any of these parties. They're all each other's friends. They're in it for themselves. They're opportunist politicians. They have no vision for the country. And it's time that good people in Sri Lanka stand up and say, let's govern ourselves and build the country that we deserve.
So you said you're in it to win it. But what happens if you don't win it, and then you've got, 10 seats in parliament, 20 seats in parliament? With that, what would you do? Because there's a high likelihood right now, although polls are rather sketchy in this country, but there's a high likelihood of a hung parliament, in which case there'd be a lot of horse dealing and alliances, coalitions, all kinds of things, which we can't even imagine right now. What happens if your party is approached by one of the larger parties to join it, and in return you would be given 2 cabinet posts or something like that?
Yeah. So first of all, when you say we're in it to win it, the whole goal is that you don't see change overnight at the same time, but you compete with the objective of saying we are ready to serve nationally. We're not just here for a certificate of participation. We're serious about this. But at the same time, we know the reality. Election cycles are not going to change in one cycle. And we have a vision for Sri Lanka when we are 65, 100 years of independence. We came up with this vision 5 years ago, saying when we retire, what's the sort of country we want to leave for our children? And we started saying, for these 10 milestones to happen by 2048, what sort of legislative policies need to be pushed? What sort of structural changes need to happen? What sort of competent individuals need to come into the right positions? And we've been working on this. So we know exactly the legislative changes we want to see. We know the bills that we'll be for, and we know the bills we're going to be against. We know what sort of things that we want to do. So even in Parliament, we will be advocating for it. We are not going to be somebody's slave or somebody's. We are there with a purpose. And at the same time, when there are good policies, we don't care who gets the credit. That's the other problem. Most of these parties, they know that maybe the opposition is doing something good, but that's too much political power for them, so they will intentionally disrupt. This is the nation's interest. And if there are good things, stand for it, support it. And when there are things that are horrible for the nation's future, stand up with some resolve and fight it until you defeat it. And we need that kind of resolve back in Parliament. You know, people are snoring and sleeping through while policies are made that's going to destroy our children's future. They just don't care. Where is that resolve? Where is that passion? Where is that commitment? Those sort of people are there. We need to get them in to the House of Parliament.
In Sri Lanka, a party is voted in, or a coalition of parties, and from the word go, it's one surprise after the other. The present government has enacted so many bills through Parliament, many of them controversial, and all these came as a surprise to many. So the problem is there's no set plan. There are manifestos which are then just chucked out. Would you give such a document which you would stand by, and that would be your plan, where you would detail exactly what a government would bring through Parliament, and also policies, policies on agriculture, policies on VAT, where it's not overnight, increased up, policies on energy, and so on and so forth, transportation, health, all that.
Absolutely. So when you look at our vision for Sri Lanka, at those 10 milestones of 2048, and then we have 14 policy committees that have been working for the last 2 years to refine these areas, to look at best practices in other countries that are similar to our context, to look at subject matter experts, Sri Lankans at home and abroad. How do we start? We start conversations with them. We've started conversations with certain governments on how did you figure this out on agriculture? How is this on AI? What's really happening? How are we ready for that reality? And so these are teams that are working, and it's beautiful because our teams are Sri Lankans in Galle, Jaffna, or Canada, Sri Lankans in Australia, or across, having these conversations. And very soon, at the end of April, we're having our policy discourse. It's almost like TED Talks on our policies, on key areas, on four key areas. And we're going to give details, but we want it to be a policy discourse so even the public can engage in the conversation. You can go to our website, you can share your thoughts and your ideas, but we know our end goal is clear on all these areas. And for that to happen, let's all be part of that journey of how we're getting there. Because most of these parties were not going to tell you where they're trying to go. They're just telling you the problem and how sad it is and how that person is responsible and how they can fix it. How? No, we'll come and do it. That's not good enough for us. We need to be able to show that. So that discourse is going to be part of our conversation. But at the same time, it's important to know that we have to start preparing Sri Lanka not just to catch up to what we've missed out on, but we also need to start planning for where the world is heading. We can't always be playing catch up. We can't always be behind the curve. And so we have to look at it futuristically, but also realistically of how things are going. And unfortunately, the level of intelligence and competence among the average politician is not at a level to play at that. So you need to bring in new people and new blood who have that ability to think. And I think we can chart that new territory.
I'm afraid time is running down, but I have one final question for you, Prashan, which is the local government elections, much delayed for years, and local government is the very bedrock of democracy. I may not even know who my member of parliament is because it's district-wide. That MP represents the district. He may live in another town. I don't know him. I can't go and knock on his door. Probably get arrested or turned away or something. But local government, the representatives are my neighbors, my family members, whether I like them or not, classmates, teachers, professionals, the local businessmen, all those people. So they are answerable to me. I can always go and knock on their doors. I can always call them up on the phone. And they don't have a coterie of bodyguards around them. They can't afford it. The government can't afford it. So they are very approachable. But for the last several years, that system has just gone out the window. Last year we had nominations called, and then nothing happened. Those nominations are still up in the air. How soon would you want the local government elections?
We ourselves were looking to compete at that election, and we're waiting. And there's no clear definition of when it's happening and all that. You cannot continue to hinder the democracy in this way. What the establishment is trying to do is to make the democracy seem more and more distant to the people and make them feel powerless, make them feel that there's nothing they can do, and then continue to stay in power. This is unheard of. How many elections have they postponed? And when's the next election they're going to postpone? This has created a dangerous precedent that we cannot tolerate. So any government that we will be governing will always ensure the democratic process is in play. Not just when it's opportunistically favorable to you, it has to run its course. This is what we are governed by. This is our constitution. At the same time, you had mentioned so many laws that are coming in. We as a party have had a fundamental rights petitions against the OSA, the enactment of it, despite what the Supreme Court had guided for the speakers, against the Speaker, all 224, and the AG. That's going to be heard in the Supreme Court very soon, hopefully. And then at the same time, we have taken against the Anti-Terrorism Act. Because we see these acts are also trying to destroy the democracy and take away the will of the people and suppress us to the dominion of this tyranny. And that has to end. And so we want to encourage the people, let's stand up together. We can do this. The established parties will not bring about change. Let's band together to bring out a true transformation in this country.
And I'm afraid that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you very much to our guest, Prashan Visser.
Thank you.
President of the United Centenary Front. Enjoyed having you. Please don't go away. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.